That night, the Atlantic swallowed an entire floating city and then remained silent for 73 years. At 2:20 a.m. on April 15, 1912, the ship hailed as unsinkable broke in two beneath a sky blazing with stars. Metal screamed. Steam burst from the funnels. Wood splintered. People cried out in terror. Then the darkness closed in. RMS Titanic vanished from the ocean's surface, dragging more than 1,500 lives down nearly 3,800 meters into the abyss. The next morning, the sea lay calm, as if no tragedy had ever occurred. Debris drifted aimlessly. No one could see the hull. No one knew exactly where it rested. The Atlantic kept its secret. In the years immediately following the disaster, investigations unfolded in both the United States and Britain. Reports ran hundreds of pages long. Testimonies were taken from the captain of the rescue ship Carpathia, from survivors, from crew members. They argued about speed, about iceberg warnings, about the insufficient number of lifeboats. Yet all agreed on one point: the wreck was still there, somewhere beneath a black ocean cold enough to freeze human bone. In the 1910s and 1920s, diving technology was primitive. Heavy diving suits with brass helmets and air hoses could descend only a few dozen meters. Titanic lay far deeper than anything humanity had ever reached. It had not simply sunk. It had slipped beyond human capability. Throughout the first half of the 20th century, the ship's location remained nothing more than estimated dots on nautical charts. Investigators relied on the final SOS coordinates, on wireless operators' accounts, on the drift pattern of debris. But the Atlantic does not stand still. The North Atlantic currents can carry objects dozens of nautical miles in mere hours. A small initial miscalculation can translate into vast distances on the ocean floor. Then, in the midst of the Cold War, technology began to change the game. During the 1960s and 1970s, the United States Navy developed advanced sonar systems to scan the seabed and track Soviet submarines. They were forced to map the deepest, darkest regions of the ocean. Underwater acoustic positioning systems, remotely operated vehicles, deep-sea imaging technologies. These were not created for Titanic, but for nuclear warfare. Yet in the shadow of superpower rivalry, hope of finding Titanic flickered back to life. In 1980, a Texas oilman named Jack Grimm publicly declared he would locate the legendary ship. He launched multiple expeditions, chartered research vessels, and used sonar to sweep vast stretches of ocean south of Newfoundland. The press followed closely. Cameras, reporters, bold promises. But the seabed is a maze of trenches, ridges, and false signals. They detected strange formations, mysterious shadows on sonar screens. None of them were Titanic. Grimm returned a second time, then a third. Each attempt reignited media frenzy. Each time, the Atlantic remained silent. Meanwhile, a young oceanographer, Dr. Robert Ballard, was working at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. He had been fascinated by Titanic since childhood. But Ballard was not chasing headlines. He understood that locating a ship nearly 270 meters long at a depth of 3,800 meters required a different strategy. The problem was not finding an intact ship. The problem was finding the signature of a disaster. Ballard studied previous deep-sea wrecks. He realized that when a ship sinks in extreme depths, it does not descend neatly and settle whole. It breaks apart. Debris scatters across a debris field that can stretch for kilometers. If they could find the debris field, Titanic would no longer be a needle in a haystack. It would be a trail. But to test this theory, he needed technology capable of operating for long periods at crushing depths. Manned submersibles like Alvin could remain on the seafloor only a few hours and offered limited visibility. Ballard needed a machine that could hover above the seabed and transmit live images back to the surface. He and his team developed Argo, a deep-sea camera sled towed behind a research vessel, capable of sweeping the ocean floor for extended periods. It was not a free-swimming submersible, but a suspended eye, illuminated by powerful lights, sending grainy black and white images to monitors aboard the ship. But there was something the public did not know. To secure funding from the US Navy, Ballard had to complete a classified mission before searching for Titanic, surveying the wrecks of two sunken American nuclear submarines, USS Thresher and USS Scorpion. The Navy wanted to assess the condition of their reactors and ensure no radioactive leakage. Ballard agreed. If he fulfilled this mission, he would be granted time and resources to pursue Titanic. In 1985, the research vessel Nor left port. On deck, Argo was readied. Steel cables stretching kilometers were coiled like a massive serpent, and engineers checked every sensor, every light. They did not announce to the world that they were hunting Titanic. Officially, it was a scientific survey. After completing the secret submarine investigation, Ballard had less than 2 weeks remaining at sea to chase his lifelong obsession. 2 weeks to find a ship lying nearly 4,000 meters deep within a search area spanning hundreds of square kilometers. Time slipped away. Argo was lowered toward the ocean floor, trailing slowly behind Nor. In the control room, images appeared on the screen. Mud, sand, ripple marks shaped by currents. Occasionally, the lifeless form of a deep-sea creature drifted past the lens. They worked through the night. Shifts rotated. Coffee went cold on metal tables. Eyes remained fixed on the monitors. Any artificial object could be a clue. Day after day, there was nothing but endless seabed. By late August 1985, time was nearly gone. Fuel would not last forever. The ocean's silence began to feel oppressive. Then, in the early hours of September 1st, 1985, at approximately 12:48 a.m., an image appeared on Argo's screen. Not the hull, not the grand bow. A round steel boiler lying tilted on the mud. Titanic had carried 29 massive boilers like it. Inside the cramped control room, no one spoke for several seconds. They simply stared. The image trembled slightly with the current. Argo's lights swept across metal coated in deep-sea life. Ballard understood instantly. They had touched a signature that could not be mistaken. The Atlantic had finally answered. The boiler lay there like a whisper from the dead. But Ballard would not allow anyone to celebrate. One boiler was not the ship. It could have belonged to another wreck. The Atlantic had swallowed thousands of vessels over the course of a century. Argo continued to crawl forward, hovering a few meters above the seabed. Its light sliced through darkness thick as ink. The water temperature hovered around -1 degree Celsius. The pressure was nearly 400 times that at the surface. Any mistake could crush the equipment instantly. The screen trembled slightly. Then another boiler appeared, and then a third. They were not scattered randomly. They curved in a line, as if some colossal force had torn them from the ship's body and hurled them outward. In the control room, engineers began breathing faster. Ballard ordered a change in towing direction. If there were this many boilers, they were moving straight into the heart of a debris field. Argo pushed forward. Suddenly, a massive slab of metal emerged. Part of the hull, thick steel bent like foil, rivets exposed, paint peeled away, marine life clinging to every surface. There was no longer any doubt. This was Titanic. The news was kept quiet aboard the ship for several hours while confirmation procedures were completed. The team checked the coordinates. Approximately 41 degrees 43 minutes north, 49 degrees 56 minutes west. Depth, nearly 3,800 meters. The location lay more than 20 kilometers from the last recorded SOS position, proof of how drastically currents and early miscalculations had skewed the search in 1912. Argo moved farther along the debris field. Objects began appearing more densely. A leather shoe resting beside a fragment of wood, or a wine bottle with its cork still intact. Fine china bearing the White Star Line emblem. A steel door. There were no bodies, but the shoes, lying side by side in the mud, spoke of what flesh no longer could. At that depth and temperature, bacteria consume organic material within years. What remained were inanimate objects and the empty spaces where human beings once were. Argo continued tracing the path like someone reading a diary written in metal. Then the darkness ahead seemed to thicken. A vast black shape slowly emerged in the beam of light. The bow. It appeared gradually, like a building materializing through fog. The railings were still there. The forward mast rose from the mud. The ship's name was gone, but the silhouette was unmistakable. Inside the control room, no one spoke. The Ballard would later say it felt like entering an underwater cathedral. There was no cheering, no applause, only silence. Titanic did not lie intact. The ship had broken in two as it sank. The bow and stern rested roughly 600 meters apart. Between them stretched a debris field nearly 2 kilometers long. Suitcases, machinery, beds, tiles, and thousands of personal belongings once owned by passengers from first class and third class alike. The bow had plunged into the mud at a slight angle. Windows along a deck were shattered. Sections of railing had collapsed from corrosion. Rusticles, icicle-like formations of decaying metal created by bacteria, hung from the hull. The stern, when located, was even more disturbing. It lay twisted and mangled, steel crushed as though by a giant hand. Decks were stacked atop one another. The propeller shaft was exposed. Everything indicated a chaotic, spiraling descent before it slammed into the seabed. The first images of Titanic were transmitted to the surface on September 1st, 1985. Within hours, the news spread worldwide. The New York Times ran a bold headline, "Titanic is found." The world erupted. The remaining survivors were by then in their 80s. Some wept upon seeing the bow on television screens. Families of victims whispered the names of loved ones long gone. A piece of humanity's collective memory had been lifted from the ocean floor. But the journey did not end with discovery. In 1986, Ballard returned with the manned submersible Alvin and the small remotely operated vehicle Jason Jr. For the first time, humans would look directly at Titanic through a window only centimeters thick. Alvin descended through darkness for more than 2 hours. Sunlight vanished after only a few hundred meters. Beyond that was absolute blackness. Only the submersible's lights illuminated a narrow world ahead. When the bow appeared before Alvin, it was no longer a grainy image on a monitor. It stood there, immense, silent. Jason Jr. slipped through broken windows, gliding past the grand staircase. Once crowned with a glass dome, it was now little more than a warped steel frame. The famous clock that once adorned the landing was gone, likely torn away when the ship split. They saw the boiler rooms, the engine rooms, the corridors where passengers had once walked in evening dress. Each camera sweep felt like opening another chamber of memory. But at the same time, controversy erupted. Should artifacts be salvaged from Titanic? Ballard believed the ship was a mass grave. He opposed removing objects. Private companies, however, saw historical treasure: fine china, pocket watches, jewelry, suitcases, coins. Each item carried enormous value. In 1987, a French-American expedition conducted the first major salvage operation. More than 1,800 artifacts were brought to the surface. In the years that followed, that number climbed beyond 5,000. Traveling exhibitions were assembled across the world. Millions stood in line to see life jackets, dinnerware, fragments of the hull. Titanic was no longer just a wreck. It became a cultural phenomenon. In 1997, James Cameron's film was released. The sinking ship on the cinema screen left global audiences breathless. Before making the film, Cameron himself completed more than 30 dives to the wreck. He filmed hours of real footage on the ocean floor, recreating every room in painstaking detail. Titanic came alive on screen, but beneath the ocean, it was slowly dying. Scientists identified a bacterium, Halomonas titanicae, that feeds on steel, creating fragile rust formations. Predictions suggest that within a few decades, the bow could collapse entirely. In 2019, remotely operated vehicles documented missing railings and collapsing decks. Captain Smith's bathtub, visible in 1985, had disappeared. Titanic is not immortal. It is decaying day by day in the freezing dark. Yet what makes the story even more haunting is a recent event. In June 2023, the submersible Titan, operated by OceanGate, carried 5 people to visit the wreck of Titanic. Approximately 1 hour and 45 minutes into the descent, communication was lost. The world watched hour by hour. Hope, then anxiety, then silence. 4 days later, debris from Titan was discovered near Titanic's wreck site. The submersible had imploded under immense pressure. All 5 occupants died instantly. At that depth, the ocean does not forgive. More than a century after the disaster of 1912, Titanic claimed lives once again. The ship is not merely a relic. It is a cold reminder of the limits of human ambition. And beneath the sea, in eternal darkness, that ghostly city still lies there, waiting. When the lights move away from Titanic, darkness immediately swallows it. At nearly 4,000 meters below the surface, there is no sunrise, no sunset, only pressure that crushes every mistake and time that erodes everything. But Titanic has never been just a wreck. It is a battleground of controversy, ambition, money, and unfinished truth. As soon as the wreck's location was announced, a legal storm erupted. Who owns Titanic? The ship belonged to Britain's White Star Line. It sank in international waters. Its passengers came from multiple nations. Families of the victims objected to what they called grave robbing. The governments of the United States and the United Kingdom began negotiating protective measures. Meanwhile, salvage companies rushed to claim exploration rights. In 1994, a U.S. court granted exclusive salvage rights to RMS Titanic Incorporated. They were forbidden to sell artifacts individually, but allowed to exhibit them and profit from displays. Thousands of objects were lifted from the seabed: eyeglasses, leather wallets, diamond rings, suitcases still containing clothing, even massive sections of the hull weighing tons. Some called it historical preservation. Others called it desecration. Each artifact carried an untold story. A pocket watch stopped at 2:28 a.m., a marriage certificate blurred by seawater, a bracelet engraved with a lover's name. These lifeless objects had become witnesses. Yet the deepest secrets were not inside the suitcases. They were inside the steel. For years, researchers debated how Titanic actually sank. Did it truly break apart on the surface? Or did it split when it struck the ocean floor? Survivors in 1912 gave conflicting testimonies. Some insisted the ship went down intact. Others swore they saw it snap in two. Only after the wreck was found did the answer become undeniable. Titanic broke in half while still afloat. The bow submerged first. The stern rose high into the air, then plunged downward in a chaotic spiral. But that was not the most startling revelation. Laboratory analysis of recovered steel showed high sulfur content and lower manganese levels than modern standards. In near-freezing temperatures, the metal became brittle. When the ship struck the iceberg at more than 22 knots, rivets popped like gunfire. Instead of a massive 90-meter gash as once imagined, researchers now believe Titanic suffered multiple narrow breaches along its hull, totaling roughly 1 square meter in area. Yet that was enough to flood the first 5 watertight compartments. The ship was designed to remain afloat if no more than 4 compartments were breached. 5 were opened to the sea. Fate did not hinge on the size of a single wound. It hinged on accumulation. Then another controversial theory surfaced: the ship switch conspiracy. Some claimed Titanic had been secretly swapped with her sister ship, Olympic, in an insurance fraud scheme. They pointed to earlier repairs, blurred photographs, slight differences in porthole arrangements. But shipyard records, hull numbers, and interior structures found on the ocean floor all matched Titanic. The conspiracy collapsed under hard evidence of steel and documentation. Still, another development carried more weight. In 2020, detailed 3D scans of the entire wreck were created using high-resolution sonar technology. Hundreds of thousands of images were stitched together into a digital model, accurate down to the centimeter. For the first time, scientists could virtually walk around Titanic without diving. The model revealed the true scale of devastation in the stern. Decks crushed and stacked like flattened layers of bread. It also confirmed the precise locations of certain engine rooms, where engineers had remained at their posts until the final moments. They knew they would die. Yet they kept the lights on so others could find their way to lifeboats. No monument bears all their names. On the ocean floor, untwisted steel doors are the only testimony. In recent years, preservation experts have warned that Titanic may disappear entirely within 30 to 50 years. Metal-eating bacteria work without rest. Steel pillars hollow from within. One day, the bow may collapse into ruin. What will remain when Titanic is gone? Images, 3D data, artifacts in exhibition halls, and memory. But memory changes with time. Some remember Titanic as a romantic love story. Others see it as a symbol of industrial arrogance. Still others view it as evidence of class division, when first-class passengers survived at higher rates than those in third class because of cabin locations and access to lifeboats. Women and children survived in greater numbers due to the rule of women and children first. Yet not everyone reached a lifeboat. Some boats were launched half-empty out of fear they might buckle under weight. Decisions made in minutes determined hundreds of destinies. Titanic did not sink because of an iceberg alone. It sank because of a chain of human decisions. Because speed was not reduced despite multiple ice warnings. Because the lookout lacked binoculars. The key to the locker had been taken by an officer reassigned before departure. Because people believed the ship was strong enough to overcome any risk. And more than a century later, humanity continues to descend to it. In tourist submersibles, autonomous robots, private expeditions. Each dive is a wager against crushing pressure. The Atlantic does not care about fame or fortune. It has only force. Perhaps that is why Titanic still haunts the world. It lies beyond reach, but not entirely. It is silent, yet it continues to speak. It is dead, yet it has never vanished from human imagination. A ghost city resting in eternal darkness, where time moves slowly but never stops. One day, when the final steel frame collapses, when the rusticles crumble into the mud, Titanic will dissolve into the ocean as if it had never existed. But its story will not sink. It will continue to be told, debated, explored, reimagined. And whenever we look out at a calm sea at night, we will remember that beneath that quiet surface lies a chapter of history frozen in cold darkness, where more than 1,500 people never returned. Titanic is not only a disaster, it is a reminder that the line between confidence and arrogance is thinner than we think. If one day you were given the chance to see the real bow resting on the ocean floor, what would you feel? Awe, fear, respect? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe Titanic should remain untouched as a grave beneath the sea, or continue to be explored to reveal more truth? The story is not over, and your voice is part of it.